What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another video here with the Bear Report. In this presentation, we're going to make our way into the space economy and talk about the first potential space based cellular broadband company called AST SpaceMobile. There have been lots of hype over AST for the past couple years, and unfortunately, it may look like the company has some major obstacles in their way. Also, if you are new here, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date on all our future content, and make sure to give us a thumbs up if you like the video. The first thing we're going to talk about is overall management. Here, we are going to analyze insider activity, their poor execution delays, lack of transparency, and dilution. And then next, we will discuss the core business, where we'll look at their financial statements, their current liquidity issues, and their questionable revenue share model. Then lastly, we're going to take a thorough look at the increased competition, specifically between AST SpaceMobile and Starlink, then following with our bare thesis on this company. Before we jump into those segments, we need to have a full grasp on what AST is trying to accomplish and what they ultimately are doing. So AST SpaceMobile is on this mission to create this first ever cellular broadband network in space. They want this to be integrated with over the 5 billion mobile phones that are currently in global use. And their goal is to dramatically broaden this network coverage, bring connectivity to areas that are currently without it, and ensure people remain connected wherever and whenever it's most crucial for them, like in a catastrophic event or in a dead zone. This is where it gets cool. The company supposedly has developed a satellite named Bluebird, roughly the same size as their Blue Walker 3, which was spanning around 64 square meters. Bluebird serves as this pivotal step towards developing the technology required for this uh, space-based commercial broadband, which they have all actually already successfully tested with Blue Walker 3. The satellite features like a vast, slim array constructed from uniform modules known as microns. Its design incorporates solar panels on one side to harness energy, while the opposite side is equipped with numerous tiny antennas forming this phased array. These antennas collaborate to concentrate communication beams efficiently, enabling the transmission of the signals from space down to Earth. The design allows it to project coverage zones onto the ground, similar to those generated by ground based cell towers, enabling standard cell phones to connect with the satellite without any modifications, making this a direct to cell or device capability without any ground satellite needed at all. It is also expansive enough to detect weak mobile signals from great distances. However, the satellite doesn't head into space in its expanded form, though. Instead, it's engineered to compactly fold into a cube for mounting, like in or like on top of a rocket here, and then it propels into orbit. And then, like after an hour post launch, it reaches low Earth orbit. That's when it's released from the rocket. Then the AST Space Mobile team configures the satellite to manage its orientation for optimal power and regulation, and they perform diagnostics with it. And then, when the conditions are right, commands are sent for the satellite to autonomously unfold, powered by energy in the hinges that link the microns. Traveling in its orbit, it completes in Earth orbit roughly every 90 minutes. The ASTS team has a cautious approach to this mission to maximize learning opportunities, and they have a extensive testing regimen to verify the performance. But this is actually already done with Blue Walker 3, which was done most recently, actually. The next phase here involves collaborating with mobile network operators, MNOs, to refine the ground based equipment, software, and operational procedures. An experimental authorization was actually granted to AST by the Federal Communications Commission that allows them to conduct these tests in the United States. Additionally, they have laid out plans for global testing on all six inhabited continents, which is in the process of being done now, actually. And as they stand now, um, currently this has led to the first direct cellular broadband connections from a satellite to standard mobile phones. Making it one step closer to their broadband network they're trying to achieve. I wanted to show that video because it gives us a good grasp on how this technology works, and I don't think a lot of people really understand how it works. And both bull and bear side, it's crucial to understand the the extensive work that's put in. So we need to understand the internal operations too and how this will be rolled out. Like seen in the video, their goal is to cover all continents. In order to make that possible, the company has partnered with many mobile network operators like AT&T, Vodafone, and Rakuten, and many more seen at the bottom here. In our global map at the top in the middle here, uh, with partnered MNOs, this is where AST satellites will be covering. It's important to note that these are signed agreements with the MNOs, so it's basically guaranteed coverage in these shaded areas if AST can get operational. They also have investors on their side like Google and American Tower, which gives a lot of reassurance because it shows that their technology is legit, helping to support AST's mission. To give more color on this direct to device capability, this works differently than Starlink's current capability, which requires a ground satellite. However, Starlink is actually in the process of making this direct to device capability come to fruition, which we will touch up on thoroughly on our competition segment later. But AST's capability doesn't require a ground satellite, it goes directly to your cell or whatever device or wearable. Now, this would be available through these MNOs, like we mentioned in our first slide, building AST's program into their network. Some will say this is still very speculative, but AST kind of de-risked this when they completed the testing with Blue Walker, and they do have signed agreements with these operators. And as seen in the image between Vodafone and AT&T, AST is already being mentioned in their own business. And according to management, they have continued to pound the table on their total addressable market, their TAM, being in the $1 trillion range. Some will say that's too unrealistic. I partially agree with this, but them and Starlink are the only companies in the world capitalizing on this opportunity. So I think this is valid for them to say. And to emphasize this once more, AST has already tested and successfully completed the direct to device capability with Blue Walker 3. Although there were repeated delays, they did indeed complete this, receiving 5G voice calls, which is incredible. Lastly, before we start our bear campaign, this is the company's executive team. AST is actually still founder led by Abel Avalon. Hopefully, I'm saying his name right. He's the chairman and CEO of the company. Also, the business is currently headquartered in the United States with other locations for manufacturing and research and development in the United Kingdom, Israel, Spain, and India. To kick this off and look at everything under this management category, we will look at the stock price history and timeline of events, insider activity, poor execution and delays, dilution, and the SEC letters. What I want to do first is show the stock price history from IPO until current with the timeline of events that have occurred. In IPO in 2019, where it was called New Providence Acquisition Company, since the IPO through SPAC, it was pretty flat until they announced they wanted to fully and officially become AST SpaceMobile. When this happened, they sold their story of becoming the first and only space-based broadband company without any of their tech fully developed. As seen, the market loved this idea here, and they reached highs of nearly $23 per share. As time progressed, being a pre-revenue space economy company burning cash, management failed to deliver on expectations multiple times, and this unfortunately has dragged the stock price down to all-time lows of nearly $2 per share, where we are today. What we're looking at is the insider buying and selling directly on the open market, according to Ortex. Now, this is not going to be a main focus at all, but I want to show this for transparency. And I didn't look much into this since the founder of the company does have a significant stake of Class C shares, but there have been no direct sells ever since IPO. There have only been two total direct buys as well. So this shouldn't be looked at as concerning if this is accurate. Keep in mind, when we say direct selling and buying, this is referring to Class A common stock on the open market. I do want to point out that if you believe in this company as an executive, acknowledging shareholder confidence, why aren't you putting some skin in the game and buying at these all-time low levels? So I find this a bit odd, but nothing heavily concerning though. So we go back to the founder's position here. Abel's stake in the company, he doesn't hold any Class A or B shares, but he does hold 100% of the Class C shares, which equates to 78 million shares. Again, we found no concerns here, but wanted to start this off by showing the insider momentum, which should be considered and looked at as neutral. What we're going to do now is take a look at the multiple delays and lack of execution by this management team. We went back and read AST's 2021 through 2023 annual reports and highlighted the expectations and delays for the past 3.5 years. So in 2021, when we look at this top half, management aimed to launch and test Blue Walker 3 in the summer of 2022. Following this, management says they are currently designing and planning to launch their commercial Bluebird satellites in 2023, expecting this to continue and complete in 2025. They mentioned their ambitious goal of 110 satellites in orbit by 2023 and 168 satellites by 2025. So if we look at where we are today, the company wasn't even close to these targets and can be looked at as unrealistic, but they said it anyway. They go on to talk about generating revenue in 2023, which never happened. And when we look at the bottom paragraph, they decided to pound the table on their BB satellite deployments. So when we take a step back and look at 2021, where we are today, this management team wasn't even close to their targets. And we'll see that in our next slides. As we head into the company's 2022 annual report, the company did launch their Blue Walker 3 test satellite, but still hasn't completed full diagnostics with it when this was supposed to be done in the summer of 2022. Below this, in the paragraph here, management throws a major curveball, drastically changing expectations since they were unable to execute, and says they are going to launch only 5 commercial Bluebird satellites in the first quarter of 2024. So this announcement in itself really made the stock price decline warranted, because what this means is the company is going to be burning cash for longer, cash they actually don't have, so they have to dilute shareholders, and we don't even know if the technology even works at this time. They went from 110 satellites in 2023 to only 5 satellites in the first quarter of 2024. As of the most recent annual report, which was released in the beginning of April, management completed full testing for Blue Walker 3 right at the end of 2023, which was way behind their expected target. Then in the middle paragraph, management oddly states that they are just now getting to the advanced stages of their Bluebird satellites. And stated below this, management says they will be transporting their satellites in January and August of 2024 to launch sites without a launch date. This is just to transport the satellites, not a launch date. So, again, the company has failed to execute on their target dates and expectations, which has further fueled to this decline in the stock price today. If we follow the trend here, the company is likely not going to meet these target dates and or will further delay the Bluebird satellite launch. Where we stand today with AST SpaceMobile management is that they drastically overpromised and underdelivered, but they sure did sell the story. And this falls directly under management for poor execution, which leads to this excessive dilution, which we're about to get into. The effect of these delays has directly impacted shareholders in a negative way. What management has had to do from these delays is heavily dilute shareholders. The company had to open an equity line of credit, ATM equity program in May of 2022. So what happened here was AST SpaceMobile entered into a common stock purchase agreement with B. Riley Principal Capital. This agreement allowed the company to sell up to $75 million of shares of its Class A stock to B. Riley at 97% of the volume weighted average price. From this, the company issued an additional 2.5 million shares under this agreement, raising cash of over 13 million. After this, and it's still ongoing, they had to obtain additional equity and take the debt financing route. AST has been raising additional capital through various means, including the issuance of equity, equity linked or debt securities, and other debt facilities. We don't have an exact number since this is still taking place to raise cash, but the number is well over 5 million shares. And to be honest, that's just a number that's pretty generous. Then, as of most recently, AST entered into a senior secured term loan credit agreement, which it's providing them a commitment of up to 100 million with $48.5 million borrowed upon closing. This actually does not involve the issuance of shares. Therefore, it does not directly dilute shareholders. But the broader context of seeking various forms of financing, including the possibility of future equity or equity linked issuances as part of the company's capital raising strategy, it suggests an environment where dilution is just going to continue. And which I did not mention an input here, but dilute shareholders are the warrant exercises in stock based compensation. There are currently 17 million shares that, if exercised, would dilute existing shareholders. But this is not related to delays, and the company still gives out stock based compensation generously, which we'll get into the financial statements later. To top this management component off, what we found pretty disturbing while digging through the SEC filings is that we found 8 SEC comment letters addressed to AST SpaceMobile's management team about their internal operations that went unaddressed multiple times, and the SEC actually needed clarification from them. Many times, AST delayed their response, causing the SEC to take disciplinary measures by giving 10 days to respond on some questions because they weren't answering the SEC's questions. Most of what they wanted addressed was their stock structure, the accounting practices, partnerships, financial projections, and how they plan on generating revenue. The SEC does this to improve transparency, and it happens occasionally, but not at the rate AST received them. So this is not good, and it directly falls under management for a lack of transparency. Now we're going to get into the core business. Here we will analyze their financial statements, overall liquidity position, and questionable revenue model. This is the company's most recent 2023 10K. We're going to take a look at a couple important metrics, year over year increases and decreases. It's important to note at revenues that AST is a pre revenue business, so it's not generating any revenue at all. As you can see here in 2022 revenues, there is a $13 million number. This is meaningless since it was from one of AST's subsidiary companies called Nano, which they actually sold. So as of 2023 and since IPO, the company hasn't generated a single dollar from primary operations. As we move down to total operating expenses, it increased over 45% year over year. This was actually somewhat expected due to Blue Walker 3, a little bit of additional headcount in AIT. When we go down to net loss, we have an increase of well over 100% year over year, which is obviously primarily from the increased operating expenses. Then below this, we get to the ugly dilution. The company diluted shareholders 84% year over year. This is something that the company had to do, though, or they wouldn't have been able to fund operations. But this is what happens when you are a pre revenue business and you don't execute. The result is most of the time that the company will end up in financial distress from dilution. And we will see this clearly in the cash flows next. This is their cash flow statement from their recent 2023 annual report. At the top here, we have our net loss. And if we go down to the net cash used in operating activities, we get a 4% decrease year over year. I put this in green because it is good. But if we look at the bigger picture, this number just isn't sustainable at all. Think about this number as raw cash burn. So the company burned through $148 million of cash from operations. Below this, we have net cash used in investing activities. This increased 278% year over year, which really added to the cash burn. But this was solely from their Bluebird satellite expenses. As we shift lower to net cash provided by financing activities, this increased 14% year over year. This is in red because they are having to seek ways to raise cash to offset the cash burn. But the increase was primarily attributed to those credit agreements. When we go down to the bottom at net decrease in cash, we get our total cash burn at 151 million. This was an increase of 77% year over year. We get this number by adding both net cash used in operations and investing activities minus net cash and financing activities. As you can see, if it wasn't for their financing agreements, AST would have been in bigger trouble than they are right now. And at the very bottom here, at the beginning and end period, for cash, we have a significant drop to 88 million. This immediately puts AST SpaceMobile in this severe liquidity position and will more than likely have to seek funding once again. They can do this in many ways, but it will likely end in more shareholder dilution. Next, I wanted to talk about their super wholesale revenue share model. This isn't really talked about among the bullish or bearish community that much, and we should really put an emphasis on this. As we all know, AST is currently pre revenue, but they have released how this model would work with just little transparency. As seen in the illustration, it would work for both personal and commercial use in these packages. They have their day pass, monthly consumer add on, monthly enterprise add on, the standalone plan, then our emergency or cat event connection. Each of these have their own unique benefits, and the company has reiterated this many times in the past. But the two issues with this is, can this actually help AST generate a profit? And what's the take rate and or pricing structure of this revenue share model? Investors on both sides have been given very little information on how this will actually work for them. And we find this kind of concerning for these reasons mentioned. And these BB satellites are going to be active in the near future. So we see this as a major concern in terms of the core business, because we have no idea how this will be more favorable over their partner MNOs.
And lastly, we're going to get into competition where we're going to analyze AST SpaceMobile and Starlink, following with our ultimate bear thesis on this company.
One of the primary building blocks of this bear thesis, and that's Elon Musk's Starlink. Back in 2023, Musk unveiled Starlink's direct to device capability, partnering with many large MNOs, one of which is depicted here, and that's T Mobile. Initially, Starlink was not a threat to this company at all, in any way. Since Starlink required a ground satellite for use, then you would be able to connect your devices. So it wasn't direct to device, it was direct to ground, then your device. Fast forwarding in time, Starlink made advancements to make this direct to device capability come to fruition. And it immediately painted this grim picture for AST for many reasons, which we'll get into our next slide here in a moment. What's going on here is we compared both AST SpaceMobile and Starlink. Before we go ahead, both companies have their advantages over one another. So this shouldn't be looked at as a biased compare and contrast. At the top for liquidity, Starlink has the obvious advantage since they are already generating revenue and are well funded, as Musk being the sole backer here. On ASTS's side, they aren't generating any revenue at all and are currently in financial distress. So Starlink wins this front. Next, we brought the versatility into the mix and analyzed the additional capabilities each company currently offers, and that was the satellite to ground. AST does not offer this package. This is satellite to ground satellite, then to your device. AST never planned on offering this, so it limits their versatility to just one offering. Starlink does offer this, and according to Musk, it has been a huge hit, which has actually led them to this direct to device package they're going to be offering. So Starlink has another advantage here. As we move to direct to device, both companies plan to get this operational and make it an offering. This is what the AST mission is built around, and right now they have a significant advantage since they have already completed testing with BW3. They were actually the first company to ever accomplish this. Starlink, on the other hand, will offer this package, but they haven't successfully completed testing this, and we don't even know when that's going to be done, which gives AST Space Mobile the advantage on this. Now, in terms of partnerships, they both have a strong base, but AST does have a bit more traction on this front when you look at them on a molecular level. Both are large, but when we get down to the numbers, it looks like AST has an edge. I mean, although Starlink's is still the same relative size. Lastly, we have who is currently in a better position to succeed. And for many obvious reasons, we give the advantage to Starlink. The reasoning behind this is because Musk is extremely well funded, so liquidity is not a concern. And Musk is also a perfectionist and has actually a solid execution track record. Plus, Starlink is already generating revenue from their other packages they offer. Although AST has completed testing on this capability they want to offer, they are in a major liquidity debacle, which will likely impact shareholders further from dilution. They aren't generating revenue and have a history of poor execution, like we went over in the delays. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if Musk launches this capability before AST does at this rate. And if it were to happen, it's going to be extremely difficult for the AST team to compete against this with Starlink already taking market share. Therefore, I mean, we conclude that Starlink is in a much better position to succeed right now. And this brings us to our ultimate bear thesis on this company. With the delays from poor execution that has caused continued dilution and put them in a severe liquidity position, coupled with their lack of transparency to shareholders and extreme competition from a well funded entity, it really points to a bleak future for this company right now. It is definitely possible, though, like it is 100% possible that this business can turn the ship around and start executing and give more clarity on their operations. But with the intensified competition from Starlink in their current financial concerns, it makes it difficult for AST to capitalize on this market opportunity. But that is it for this presentation. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you give us a subscribe to stay up to date on our bi weekly videos and make sure you like the video. Thanks for watching.